Can we just take a moment to think about Steve Jobs, who, when he announced the original iPhone in 2007, described it as an iPod, a phone, and an internet mobile communicator, a device that was absolutely beyond its time in every sense of the word. And it really did set the path for the modern smartphone that we have today. A lot of competition led us to where we are, but without this, would we really be here today? And I think if Steve Jobs was able to announce in such a way this device from the very start, with the features we're about to see, Hollywood would be mentioned, cinematographers would be mentioned, and if it was in 2007, people would be blown away. But it's 2021, and this is about the 15th generation of iPhone. It's about the 30th, 31st, 32nd, and maybe 33rd actual models of iPhone. It's the iPhone 13. So before I dig too deep into the review here of the iPhone 13, we have to talk about cinematic mode. It's one of really two headline features, cinematic mode and battery life, about the iPhone 13, and it applies across the range. Even the iPhone 13 mini gets this cinematic feature and a better battery. So how does it work? It's all about the cameras, the sensors, getting depth from the video that's recorded and allowing you to place focus anywhere in the shot. Now, when I'm sitting back there, it sees my face, it chooses that as the focal point. But when I mentioned the iPhone 13, it came into focus because in post, after I recorded it, I was able to go into the edit and choose what was in focus. And that's the genius here. It's not just when you've got a camera operator going, yes, choose that, focus on that person, and the intelligence of a person turning and it focusing on someone else. That's brilliant. It's the ability to edit this after the fact. So let's demonstrate cinematic mode in as best way as I can here on my own in the office in lockdown. And that is by creating a bit of depth and showing you how it works, how it records a normal video, and how you edit to create that depth and that focal point where you want it to be. All right, so let me demonstrate cinematic mode. Now this is obviously static shot, static room, just one person, and it will retain the focus on me all the time, no matter what I'm talking about. So if I'm referring to things at the back of the room, it's going to leave me in focus. And if I'm referring to the original iPhone there in front of me, it's going to be blurred. I'm going to be focused, and it creates this kind of focal point, this, let's call it this area here. Now, one of the things I've demonstrated here is actually depth is critical when you're using cinematic mode. This iPhone here in front of you is 1.5 meters from the camera, whereas I'm now 4 or 5 meters away. In the back of the room, let's call it 6 or 8. You've really got to have those 3 levels of depth. The difference between this frame and that frame in cinematic mode, very minimal, if at all. But if you create that true sense of depth, then it becomes quite a remarkable feature. Now, what you've just watched was pretty useless, but it was cool. It was like a bokeh effect, a portrait mode for video, if you like, because I stayed in focus. But let me just stop now and switch to a screen recording of the rest of this video, so where you can see me editing this video. So I'm going to keep talking, I'm going to do some more demonstrations, but now I'm in the screen recording, and so you'll see me pause and stop and tap. And when I tap on the screen of the iPhone 1, it comes into focus, and I'm now blurred. The rest of the room is blurred, and your vision, your focal point in that video, your eyes are drawn to that item. And I can tap and bring the focus back to me. Now, if I was to come close here, then we'll probably end up with a nice focal point of both me and the iPhone. But if I was to look back and indicate that we should maybe tap on that iPhone 10, or maybe that iPhone 7, or the very back of the room, you might notice slight differences when we say use the back of the room, but you won't notice much between these two. Let's bring the focus back here on the iPhone 1. The original iPhone in the Grid Studio unpacked there, love those boxes. But keep the focus back on me with a tap of the face, and the tracking is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And this feature is only available on iPhone 13, and it is available, by the way, on every iPhone 13, right down to the iPhone 13 mini. This was shot using the iPhone 13 Pro. Cinematic mode is brilliant. I really think it's amazing. It's an amazing kind of use of both hardware, chipset, and the overall software technology they've built to make that happen. I think, as I said, it can get better. I think it's very not quite version 1, but you see it struggle around the edges of a tree. Like I use it, I'll show you here. I used it with the kids in the backyard, just trying to find depth and see how much depth you needed to really get the effect. And it was amazing, don't get me wrong, but I think that it struggled with some of those edges on the plant and stuff like that. But that's a very picky way to look at it. I think for a first crack, we're seeing something very special. If you think back to iPhone 7, when it first had portrait mode, that was pretty amazing, and it's only gotten even more amazing since. And by the way, cinematic mode works on the front-facing camera as well. So it's software, it's not using the LiDAR on the Pro because it's across the whole range. So it's phenomenal. So let's have a look at the full lineup of the iPhone 13. Here they are. So look, straight out of the box, I still love the iPhone 13 mini, or the mini version. The 12, they reckon they didn't sell very well, but I think it just didn't meet the expectations of the retailers. I think Apple always knew there was a market for it, not just on size, but on price. This is $11.99 in Australia. So this is the midnight color. I'm gonna say at certain angles, there's a dark blue to it. I think that's where they get the midnight from, but primarily it's the black, and there's this beautiful matte black finish on the edge around that metal frame, which I really, really like. Then you've got your standard iPhone 13, and again, this is in the blue, and I think this is it's a slightly lighter blue than last year, and I'll show you those comparisons shortly. And it's really just this redesign of the camera bump. Lots of fun being had on social media, TikTok, with people just going, "Oh, how hard was it to design?" And I think that's why I still think this is an iPhone 12s, because this is about as big as the change gets, and I don't have a problem with that. Year on year, you cannot expect overwhelming innovation. But anyone that says that Apple kind of got tired here is crazy. Think about 6 to 6S, 5 to 5S, frankly 7 to 8. The challenges have always been to increment slowly rather than generational leaps year on year. It's almost impossible to sustain that level of innovation and research and development. So inside is what really matters. All of these have that A15 Bionic chip, which gives it some serious series power. Here's the gold version of the 13 Pro. Look, it's beautiful. I'm not a big fan of gold because it's so blingy, but if you've got this, you're really going to want to put a clear cover on because you're going to want to show off that you went gold. This camera bump is enormous. It doesn't, to the naked eye, let alone the dimensions, really seem that much bigger. But on the desk, like when you're looking at it kind of sitting still, it's huge. They're really assuming you're putting a cover on this, and you should be. I mean, this thing's costing a couple of grand, right? So you should be putting a cover on these from day one. But they haven't innovated in the size of the glass, the lens, or anything there. It's really, struggling to compress down to get a thinner design if you look at what others are doing with the flatness of phones, like from TCL and others like that. But that will come in time. And here's the Big Daddy in Sierra Blue. This is the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Now, if you were to get this in 1 terabyte size, you're looking at $2,719, the most expensive iPhone ever. And that's not because they put the prices up. The prices here are the same as last year. The 1 terabyte option is a new storage space option. Look, if you're taking a lot of video, I guess that's a useful thing, but that's a lot of money to spend on a phone. And by God, if you're spending that much money, please, screen protector, case, the whole box and dice. But also interestingly, in Australia, Apple Care Plus now comes with a theft and loss option. So you can essentially insure your phone, pay a monthly fee or a 2-year fee to have theft and loss prevention. And there's a couple $100 excess if you do have your phone lost or stolen. So maybe that's an investment first and foremost that's worth looking at. Now the boxes are also quite interesting because these do not come in any plastic packaging. And the way it works, I've obviously already opened these, but I did quickly try and record. There's a small, I guess, sticker. You'll be familiar with it from other Apple products, the green arrow, and you kind of rip it off. And so basically on the inside of the box here, all the way around, it's a sticker. And that sticker then comes over and onto the back of the box. You rip it off at the top and the bottom, and then the box becomes loosened. So not a bad way to approach it. And once again, inside, just USB-C to Lightning, and your paraphernalia ready to rock and roll. The boxes are as thin as they were last year. Look, battery life is the big winner here other than cinematic mode. The battery life, look, I can't really speak to it because we're in lockdown, we're not doing much. It's a really hard time to test a phone like this, but I certainly didn't find myself reaching for the charger as I have with other phones recently. So I know I'm getting a solid all-day battery, and you're getting a little bit more than an all-day. An hour and a half on the Mini, up to 2.5 on the Pro Max. 1.5 on the Pro, 2.5 on the standard 13. So there's solid extra battery life here, and those are kind of the average use figures. If you're to turn off airplane mode and just watch a video that's stored on the device, there's crazy extra battery life on these things now. So there's no doubt they've improved battery life, and I think that's to their credit because really it's a slightly thicker phone, it's a slightly heavier phone than last year, but we're talking grams here. But to improve the battery life is an important and a big deal. And the other thing, I need to find the iPhone 12s to show you that. All right, so let's look at iPhone 12 Pro versus iPhone 13 Pro. And really, I think the big thing here is what everyone's been talking about is the notch. Now, Apple don't refer to it as the notch. They refer to it as the True Tone sensors or the camera, front-facing cameras, whatever you like. They say it's 20% smaller, and it is. So basically, it's very hard to see here, but on the iPhone 12, the speaker, if you look at your own iPhone 12, the speaker's about 4 millimeters into the phone. On the iPhone 13, it's right up there on the edge, essentially on the edge of the metal. And so by removing that and then bringing all the cameras in, so if you just look at your own iPhone, if you've got an iPhone 12, just look at it under light and you'll see there's a couple of sensors or cameras on the left and the right of the speaker. So take the speaker up and bring those together and you've got a smaller notch. I haven't noticed it. Like it's not a lot of real estate. I don't think it's something to write home about at all. Unless they can get this thing down to underscreen or cut out, I don't think it's worth writing home about. What am I getting? An extra amount of battery signal or extra messaging from my telco? It's not a big deal. But the other thing that's different is screen brightness. There's a definite improvement in the brightness. It really leaps out at you. No point showing you that on camera. It doesn't really show. But there's a definite improvement in brightness on the screen. And of course, on the Pro and the Pro Max, you have Pro Motion. I've always said that 120 Hertz on the Samsungs and all the others that are doing it is great, but what difference does it make? Now, as I sit here and scroll through a website really fast, it still looks blurry to me. I'm not noticing it, is what I'm saying to you. And which is, I've said all along, I think it's a real video file thing to want for and ask for. Now, if you're playing a game that is configured for 120 frames per second and developers can do that, you may well notice some advantages. If you're watching videos, you won't because they're normally 25 frames per second. If you're browsing and flicking through your apps, I mean, yes, it's doing it better and smoother and greater, but to the naked eye, I don't think it's that big a deal. I'm sorry. I would prefer to go into accessibility, and maybe one day I'll try this, go into accessibility and turn off the Pro Motion effect because I'm tipping I'll get slightly better battery life. It won't be much, but it'll be ever so slight. And maybe for some people, that'll be worth it. Now, there's two other big things to write home about, especially on the camera of the Pro. You're getting sensor shift. Now, what that means is the sensor is actually shifting around in the camera to give you stabilization. And I think that's a critical thing because it's a good advance in image stabilization. But on the Pro, the big thing that they strangely didn't really get into was we've now got 3 times telephoto zoom up from 2. And they always talk about the total amount of zoom being 6 times because you can go back in wide, then to the standard wide, and then forward 3 into the ultra wide. But in reality, optical zoom is a big deal. And to go to 3 times optical zoom is a big win for iPhone users. That little bit of extra zoom is a reason to get the Pro over the standard phone, without question. So 3 times optical zoom, and again, that's way behind many of their competitors. I hear you screaming at the screen, Android fans, but I'm sorry, when Apple do stuff, they do it well. They don't just do it because it's a number. The digital zoom numbers are also up on all the devices. So that's when you pinch and zoom onto a photo that you're taking. Don't ever do that because it's really just cropping a photo. Just take the photo and then crop it later if you have to. So 3 times optical zoom on the Pro models. But here's something you probably haven't heard that is on every single model of the iPhone 13. Dual eSIM mode. Now, you've heard of dual SIM. That's where you put a physical SIM card in the side and then you can maybe use an eSIM to connect to another network. Well, now the iPhone 13 allows you to have 2 eSIMs. So in Australia, you can have Vodafone and Telstra on one, or Optus and Vodafone, or Optus and Telstra on another. It's quite great because these days eSIMs are so much easier to set up and do. I highly recommend using them if you aren't already. It's really just a matter of when those eSIMs are going to come to our second tier telcos. And maybe, just maybe, this pushes the argument with all the telcos to get that happening. So, iPhone 13 mini, iPhone 13, iPhone 13 Pro, and iPhone 13 Pro Max. As my kids tried to say earlier today, we're going to play dominoes. I said, hell no, we're not. $1,199 for the standard iPhone 13 up to $2,799, but $1,849 or so for the standard 13 Pro Max. Never before has it been more clear that you do not need to upgrade from the iPhone 12 to the iPhone 13. 1 year to another, nope. iPhone 11, yeah, it's appealing. iPhone 10 backwards, this is a big step forward. And I think that especially people who are loving playing with video, I can imagine a lot of social media videos being made using cinematic mode. I think that's going to be the thing that stands out. It's the way you're going to see that someone has an iPhone 13.